part of that for departments, and it was the part for the bearing arms and the harm, for the love and the not for the knowing, for the actually the feeling for the victims and loved ones, and never the walking up and the waking up in the morning, for the past and that, repeating itself without the water for the scene again, for the hurt for the same place at a different time of the schedule, for the total for the later sooner, for the darker dress, the lunar rise to perspective. As it was dark for the lunar to rise into the spectrum for the light, this would be the higher highs and lows, and those who tides divine and receive for the magically return the rain into the shower for the hope and longevity, but to prepare yourself for the drought, for the harvest, and never the nutrients, and never the necessarily depend upon those who survival skills. Place it out for the scale for the weight. Place on the scale for the you just wait for the weight for the won't to spoil the secrets of the be placed on the scale for the weight for the time for the dough to spoil the secrets of the finding fishing upon you too much consumption of mercury that keeps it only retro and renegating for the middle renovate for this would be the host of runs and moist and the other part for the this would be departments and not the dense and metropolitan areas that have the grid grinds after the dense and this would be the determination for the standing united for the senses and maybe the extension for the ego for the loss in your protein food for the chart that has not been revised and revealed, and this will only define what you feel. The corporation is sold to be loaning enough of the expensive for the life for the barely making wages that were tough enough to wedge out of the tight crack filled with the neighborhoods, and now niggas is doing crack. Not for the feeling with the neighborhood, whenever the hoods don't know their neighbors, the enslave for the mentality for the institution, for the raps and lives of better behavior, for this would be the enslave for the mentality, for the institution of raps and bars without a John with a flag, the culture, the solidarity for the spec, self-dishonored out of the welded, partially put together for the standing is strong, the stillness stand still, for the confidence for the memory, the coincidence and the find a product to be wrong but mislabeled. Mislead that pen for no paper rights, and now the was the fits in the air for this to be used, but now the tempers flare. There's the music playing loud with the stereotype, and you know the type that I have something to say for less than how you feel, for the be numb enough for the behind that for the chest and treasure for the found behind that man for the coordinate for the over the coordinates and straight or star like the dark segregation you're finding saturated melanin. It was the place that I could mislead for the pen for the paper to write that feeling of fits for the F for the melanin for the whose rhyme is that melancholy enough for the bend in the whole sense and came out of one for the looking for the sea level to feel it walking tall enough for the world for the story for the giants for the play for the Broadway for the south for that for the free change no donating for the owning the film for the just wipe the eyes for the watch and film maybe wipe the film for the eyes and change them donate for the that for the fiction or vision that for the there for the remembrance and the glass to give yourself for the amnesty for the forefathers of the sight to the fiction for the forget them in any ways and this is the meaning that for the meaning for the ways and this is misleading for the tour guides for the entertainment for the train their inner will be tamed enough for this to be the only blame no the blame for the vine to die for the name for the end tapper for the periods and house to die for the past that bled until you find a faith for the lower class and getting high enough for the panting feelings walking down the name for the terrible territory for the security for the terror alleys and use that for the red light shortcuts when you run all these hippies never find that hard or hippie doing shortcuts and this is the hat along for the hair for the hip style enough for the technique one the sleeves and nine to find ornaments for the treason or the reasonably and enough for to be worn for the sleeves like that for the artificial beliefs and moist and not define that for the stretch of limits to find the balance for the accommodating what you can always want for the accomplishing your compounding for the LGBT for the foster care for the knowledgeable children and enough for the notable and effective for the disability and effects and never to be available eventually for the time of the now for the architectural timeline for the quotas and outline for the time frame for the memory to insert yourself for this to be the only find the way the quota for the world numbers in line upon a schedule for the facts or face the facts of that with the past and over the barricades of the sale for the old and aren't that the same price of the passing of the barricades and you can find a discounted for the same price and you can find it what's on store for the discounted for the generics and ways of that for the sale for the finals and never to get a receipt for the you can find a gift and a smile for the this and be the thank you for the no live and enough for the asking for the state I divide for whoever whether or not you buy or not for the death for the amount for the customer for the this to be the selling with the wider fellow with the fact for the this for the rich and the grand opening for the somewhere for the not and find the cause of the competitive for the pioneer passing nothing to see that for the more integral business for the jurisdiction and honor and understanding I don't care for the 200 nights of metal heads and this and metal hearts and new grand being penetrated for the against white fiction and not for the commenting conniving enough for the commenting for the commentate for the commentary for the death words and the total the cemetery I should rise again like a rope different outcome. But it didn't come to doubt repetitive wages, wedged between my heart and a hard place to hurt the face that I would stare for the delusion of mirrors and insanity. Experience expectations made a fool of once again for the last time, like he said it was the first, and it was no harm for the hurt the defenses that bury arms and tie behind the backs of effort for the front is hard to bear. But now, even after experiencing that for the feeling of the truth, it's not for the bears, or not for the be the victimized by the fear, for the grief, for the lack of your direction. It's the reason why I keep talking with what's left to lose and what's lost. It's rightfully denied. Told you there's no trust without production. There's no production. production without that scene for the support for the system, the foundation, the sink on your countertops, or offers that for the water for the stability for you able to be the know. Even if you were even able to stable the staples instead of that steam, the steam, state the that for the sake. There is a verb that would describe the lack of action, seen for the blind sight, recited for the preference and preferably they could be used for the chromosomes and you see the future for the now. You can't see yourself repeating the past now. I know you guys that this is not for the never the mind, for the advertisement, for the add-ons and subliminal caretakers that will only help find, help to leading with you well in position or not to be positive enough for the post your doubt, for the telephone post and nuclear social site, for the devil to be the non-seeker to deny for that, for the system, for the doesn't walk them, for the into the walls and halls, and those are hollow trust accounts that to pour out the hope. You know, table the contents and the thorny hour to find the contestants, the lessons of your consequences to repurchase your returns and shell. Asking not for the label for the silver shell out of stock for the game, for the need to bury, to burn the opportunity for the opposing, the drives, the doubts, the promises for the ending, accountability for the that, and adding on to another consumer for the loss of the over this attract, that accountability for the no savings and over that for the draft. Understanding that for the given, to be the 5-star rating for the held up in the memory banks with no execution, with the well aware for the thought, for the just to be the shooter, not for the lead out of the practicing awareness for the because you're surprised at what you're wearing. Filling the mirror for that to be broken glass, unfamiliar. Generous ways for the thoughtful sun to be shined, for the warm out of the heart, for the body, the temperature, the difference because the climate, the temper, for the half, the burn, for the crosshair, for the condition, that for the left, of the bounce of the wind. Should have expected that to be like a kite day for such a drive in the park with no redundancy. No occupants. Tenants' rights are wrong, express that for the compressing of what you so much about the shadow that holds in the science and logic to teach them for the life to learn. If you can remember what you've been told, not for the better vein, for the eat yourself out of that, for being involved for the outcomes, the coming in and out of it, announce that for the squatting, for where you eat, for the pray before you pray, appearing hungry and after the walk away, but like your back is turned for the time, for the vulnerability, but like an old newspaper for the proposition, the propaganda, proposing this a product we provide. Proof of that for the progress, produce of that for the production, progress for pronouncing, support for the supplements of the sustain your love, and this is the lacking of food, super for the supper of thoughts, of this is understanding for the why you enjoy the being full, and never the happy thought, but understanding for why you enjoy the family. Find the taste in your mouth, your private floss, and the bites, and the week work, and the week have the nuances true nowadays, in between space and time, and occupying. Full of anxiety for the battle for the sobs, carbonated for the sobriety, for the making your own little drinking game where you still debase it, no consequences, no conscience, and no sliding to regrets and finding out the way home again. For those who, although wait for the addict to start trashing your zip code, body language to the translated to the central. With the behavior for the doubt is called a serious and doubt for the orientation, the comments, and without a commitment for the communication. These vibes are only the communion for the contents and silent auctions for the highest bid. Dirty job at the bitch, would you get behind the bed for the unwanted desires and feel? Find yourself inside for that, for the one in the management business, for the vision, that for the day, for the way, for the limitation, and you're closer enough for the proceeding, and where we get closer when you're losing our heart. And the final details and getting dizzy enough for the chasing the inevitable, for the reality, for the lessons in class, and that for the self and awareness and way with the subliminal, for the crimes and talk, that for the behind your backs and put in like a bundle, ponder lesson, this a pounder for the dapper golden retriever, for the capitalist and depths and delta stats and minds and over minor facts, and this it don't matter for the much you used to do when you can find it taking other word for the truth and harder facts and told us that we are. Not the harsh critics without the fine, not for the passion to create that masterpiece, for one of another divine environment, for the creating the bliss and the comfort, for the pleasure, for the to be inflicted with the pain, for the never include that, for the obligated to be a part of the self and installation, for the needed maturity. Age and never to calculate your attention span and duration for pleasure. Neglect for the imagination, imagine what can become to inherit the falsehood, for the upscale, for the time, for the just adjacent to your never-ending story, the house on hillside, for the drive, for the park avenue, for the rich and the good, for the do, for the rejuvenate, for the poor, for the eat and deaf, for the street. Organic, rich enough for the rejuvenate for the poor. Lines of stores, bread that gets the road converted to the croutons and crochet for the leftovers of the yarn, the yearnings, and for the only the blessings for the this to be the generator for the generations, your generous and genders and gentlemen for the active without there being a genetic inheritance and poor judgments in your courts. Anchor the stagnation for the standards to walk through another good behavior, the army of recruiters and frontline for the war for the justification. The reasons there for the only way we're fighting for the peaceful future for the derogatory expressions, the right to be proved and provoked. Aye. Provoke. Blocking it for the protect that bearing arm for harm. lose the compromise for the empty promises full of remorse and can't find a way out with the picking light in the shadows and I ease the look of the logic and the sweat produces that for the thought for the modified for the sleep through the amnesty for the periphery of the eyes and see that was unbelievable to praise ideology for the parallel that was formed for that unbelievable for the prey to you know, for the paradox of the line for propaganda for the proportion to pray before you pray the eyes open the closed mind find the bliss and execution to feel the peace beneath that surface of the common ground for this unfiguring bloodlines and time for the risk and loosely resist that for the institution for the entity of your ancestry your blood and tough you had no ears to feel witness in the mirror for the passing message you walk past that for the pastors and place in plastic garbage patches and still the fill of holes and holes and the need to take apologetic for the forward the good to find silence rather than authentic for the talk about the ears of description interpersonal relationships and interpretation for the scriptures of the living vine and vine the haiku for the syllables to fill out the pebble of each pain this is settled for the unsure for the raise of hand and fist title for the righteous acts and not reactions to rights and spiked on the tender topics of troubling water for the struggles like jackets too cold to chill factor for the blood for the warms of heart ignite the emotion utilizing the kinetic energy for the circulation to break the cycles and patterns talk to us as a culture full the paradox used somewhere for the synonymous to the equinox of the times of relevance when to find that truth and to find the numbers and from not to forget them for not to forget them from not more than for to get them from not therefore not to know what they do for the anti-curse words from the being tongue-tied lack of the words that mislead misled for the heart for no piece of paper mache tuber balloons with reason not to find the flight for the counting for the number of times I propose it was purpose my position to propel myself vision to tunnel suicide that for the high notes of the sing that for the mother noise mother earth white noise mistaken and missing and overtaken and not replacing the vibrating and rating the rights of by the fine tribes of ox and herbs all those who saw the reincarnated for the carnation to love it was that for the vehicles to drive no ambition to steer themselves clear for the pollution can't wait to give carbon emission for the electronically recondition yourself with the weight to giving the vital time did not have that name for there was the numbers of the clock there was the quarter to four you can find myself like Benjamin Button for the rendition for the inviting of the what you invited for the history for the absolute libraries where it's lying the silence nine finds to speak too loud to rise and wait in the sheep you wonder why truth lies in the middle for the perception of have new vows and never explain sometimes why it's hard to comprehend who's the compromise of the empty promise and full of remorses that can't find a way out for the picking light through the shadows so easy to way overlook through your logic and split producing the thought for the modified the sleep to the amnesty for the periphery of the eyes to see the unbelievable to pray to your ideologies and parallel paragraphs
And a part of that for the departments, and it was the part for the bearing arms and the harm, but the love and not for the knowing, for the actually the feeling for the victims and the loved ones, and never the waking up and the waking up in the morning, for the past habit of repeating itself, without the water of the steam again, for the hurt for the same, place at a different time for the schedule, for the door for the later sooner, for the darker days, the lunar rise to perspective. As it was dark for the lunar to rise into the spectrum for the light, this would be the higher highs and lows, and those for tides to find and receive for the magically, and return to the rain into the shower for the hope and longevity, to prepare yourself for the drive.
And a part of that for the departments, and it was the part for the bearing arms and the harm, but the love and not for the knowing, for the actually the feeling for the victims and the loved ones, and never the walking up and the waking up in the morning, for the past habit of repeating itself, without the water of the steam again, for the hurt for the same, place at a different time for the schedule, for the door for the later sooner, for the darker days, the lunar rise to perspective. As it was dark for the lunar to rise into the spectrum of the light, this would be the higher highs and lows, and those for tides divine to receive for the magically, and return the rain into the shower for the hope and longevity, to prepare yourself for the drought, for the harvest of the never the nutrients, and never the necessarily depend upon those with the survival skills. Place it out for the scale for the weight, or place on the scale for the you just wait for the one with the spoil. The secrets of the be placed on the scale for the weight for the time for the dough. The spoil of the secrets of the find the fishing upon you too much consumption of mercury that keeps them only retro and renegating for the better renovate for the this would be a host of roads and moist and other part for the this would be departments and not a dense and metropolitan areas that have the grid grinds that for the dense and this would be the determination for the standard component the united for the senses and maybe the extension for the ego for the loss of your protein food for the chart that has not been revised or revealed and this will only define what you feel. The corporation that sold them been loaning enough for the expensive for the life for the barely making wages they were tough enough to wedge out of the tight crack filled with the neighborhoods and now niggas is doing crack and not for the feeling in the neighborhood whenever the hoods don't know their neighbors the enslaved for the mentality for the institution for the raps and divs and better behavior for this would be the enslaved for the mentality for the institution of raps and bars without a genre the flag the culture the solidarity for the spec self the soldered out of the welded partially put together for the standing and strong and the steel and the stand the steel for the confidence for the maybe the coincidence and the find a product to be wrong or mislead that pen for no paper rights and now that was if it's in the air for this to be used for now the tempers flare. There's the music playing loud and the stereotype, and you know the type that I have something to say for the lesson, how you feel for the be numb enough for the behind that for the chest of treasure for the found behind that meant for the coordinate for the over the coordinates and straight or star like the darkness segregation you'll find a saturated melanin. It was the place for that for the mislead for the pen for the paper to write that through the fits of the F for the melanin for the whose rhyme is that melancholy enough for the bend of the whole sense and came out of one for the looking for the sea level to feel the walking tall enough for the depth of the world for the story for the giants for the play for the Broadway for the south for that for the free change and no donate over the older the film for the just to wipe the eyes fit the watch of film. Maybe wipe the film from the eyes and change them. Donate for the die for the fiction. Or if it's not for the there for the remembrance and the glass to give yourself for the amnesty for the forefathers of the sight to the fiction for the forget them in any ways. And this is the meaning and that for the meaning for the ways. And this is the misleading for the tour guides for the entertainment for the train. Our inner will be tamed enough for this to be the only blame. No, the blame for the vine to die for the name for the end tamper for the periods and house to die for the paths. Bled until you find a faint for the lower class and getting high enough for the panting feelings. Or walking down the name for the terrible, the territory, for the security, for the terror alleys, and use that for the gridlock. Shortcuts when you for all these hippies. And never find a horror, a hippie doing shortcuts. And this is the hat along for the hair, for the hip, your style, enough for the technique. One the sleeves and nine to find ornaments for the treason. Or the reasonably and enough for to be worn for the sleeves like that for the artificial beliefs and points and not define that for the stretch of limits to find the balance for the accommodating what you always wanted for the accomplishing your compounding for the eligibility for the foster care for the knowledgeable children and enough for the nodal and effective for the disability and effects and never to be available eventually for the time of the now for the architectural timeline for the quotas and outline for the time frame for the memory to insert yourself for this to be the only find avoid the quota for the world numbers in line upon a schedule for the facts. Or face the facts of that with the past and over the barricades of the sale for the old and aren't that the same price of the passing of the barricades and you can find a discounted for the same price and you can find it what's in store for the discounted for the generics ways of that for the sale for the finals and never to get a receipt for the you can find a gift and a smile for the distant be to thank you for the no live and enough for the asking for the state Vine to vine, who whether or not you buy or not for the death of the amount for the customer for the this to be the selling with the wider fellow the effect for the this for the rich and the grand opening for the somewhere for the not and the kind to find the cost of the competitor for the pioneer fast enough to receive that for the moral integral business for the jurisdiction and honor the understanding honor I don't care for the this of hungry nights and metal heads and this and metal hearts and who can't be penetrated for the plain and swipe conviction enough for the convincing or conniving enough for the commenting for the commentate for the commentary for the death person and over the tombs of cemetery I should rise again like a rose I will.